monthly themed webinars. This webinar is going to give us an overview of the sector, some history and context, and up-to-date facts and figures on care farming. We hope you enjoy it and find it useful. Just some brief housekeeping points before we start. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Social Farms and Gardens website in due course, so you can always go back and revisit anything that you feel that you've missed. Your details and attendance are private and won't be shared with anyone else. Attendees are not visible via the video link and will be automatically muted. Any questions can be asked through the questions function in the menu. You can type your question in and one of the team will pick it up and ask it on your behalf, or if you wish, we can unmute you once the recording's finished to ask the questions at the end. Any links in the presentation will be pasted into the chat function to enable attendees to click on and view the information during the webinar. So you should be able to see three faces on your screens at the moment. I'm Deborah Evans, I'm the Regional Care Farming Manager for Growing Care Farming. But I'd also like to introduce Dr Rachel Bragg, whom some of you may already know. Rachel's well placed to talk about our subject today, as she spent 18 years as a researcher at the University of Essex and still remains a visiting fellow in the Green Exercise Research Group. She's done a lot of work researching the relationship between nature, health and mental well-being. She's an expert in she's been actively involved in the development of the UK care farming sector for 15 years, and in 2015 Rachel and I both worked together at Care Farming UK, which has now gone on to become Social Farms and Gardens. Rachel's development manager of Growing Care Farming, and she takes the lead on much of our central advocacy as well as the data collection. You should also be able to see Pearl. Give us a wave, Pearl.
Hi.
Pearl's our Code of Practice Administrator, and she's going to be monitoring the questions during the webinar. She'll also lead on the Q&A session at the end. But as I said before, please feel free to post any questions as they occur to you during the webinar, and we'll pick them up with Rachel when she finishes the presentation. There's an option to post them either publicly or privately. When the presentation starts, Pearl's going to turn her camera off so as not to distract, but we will see her again at the end. So you should just be able to see me and Rachel during it. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel now, and she's going to give us an outline of the sector, the changes that have happened along the way, and some key trends based on recent data we've gathered.
Thanks, Debbie. Well, I'm delighted to be able to share with you some insights on the care farming sector today. I thought I'd put a quick overview up to show what we're going to be covering before going into questions at the end. So I'm going to talk a little bit about terminology, set some context, talk about our annual surveys before going straight in to talk about the scale of the care farming sector, about the care farms, the services they deliver, people who attend care farms, referral routes and funding before pulling things together at the end. Okay, so I thought we'd start with clarifying the terminology that we use throughout growing care farming. Because there's always much debate, and we use care farming. Originally we used care farming because we took it from the Dutch green care farming back in the early days. But obviously there are other terms in use. Some people prefer to call it social farming, green care farming, all sorts of things. We tend, they're essentially all the same, and rather than focus on the name, we tend to focus on the service and quality. We're also not quite so focused on the type of site either, as they vary so much, and often sites will also offer some, as well as care farming, maybe some animal assisted therapy or social and therapeutic horticulture, but it's all green care. So the other term that I wanted to just clarify before the off really is when we're talking about people who attend care farms as part of their health, social care or special education package, we use the service user. There are other terms out there, as you can see, but we primarily use this is so that we can communicate to commissioners better, so that everybody's clear about who we're actually referring to. Although I have to say, over the years, personally, I've come to like the term co-farmer. But okay, so that's just a little bit of clarification on the terminology to start with that we use. So although the name care farming is relatively new, concept of care farming sort of really isn't. Some care farms in the UK have been delivering care farming services for over 30 years. And as I'm sure you're aware, farms and gardens have traditionally been used to provide support. Historically, we've seen farms supporting the slow or people in the village with a special need, almost early form of supported employment. We're also familiar with prison farms, school farms, hospital farms, convalescent gardens, monasteries and convents with gardens for the unwell, long established in history really. So it's not new, the concept's not new. Also, care farming has an international aspect as well. We haven't just been doing it in the UK. Care farming has been happening in Europe and beyond. Way back in the early days, the Netherlands really was seen as the market leaders, if you like, leaders in the field for care farming. But as you can see, care farming is happening in all sorts of different countries. I've just named a few here on the slide. But the key thing really is that each country's care farming sector has developed in a different way, and they've all taken a different pathway, very much largely dependent on the context and not least the type of agriculture in the country. For example, in the Netherlands, care farming has really developed around commercial agriculture and a formalised partnership with social care, whereas in somewhere like Italy, it's developed around care for those with a special need on smaller farmstead. And as I said, every country is different, and in 2005 we were kind of considered behind the leaders in Europe, but the sector has changed such a lot in the last 15 years, and it's really exciting. We've grown from explaining what care farming is to promoting it as a quality service provision delivered by professionals and benefiting many individuals with a defined need. And I'm happy to say that in 2020 we're not behind anymore. Okay, so part of why we are where we are now is due to the evidence and knowledge about our sector that we've commissioned and worked with partners, including care farmers, of course, to obtain. And because we know what's going on, it's easier to promote and advocate on behalf of those delivering the services. And specifically, providing a snapshot or a regular snapshot of our sector helps us to communicate the services we provide and to give an idea of scale, coverage and capacity, which helps us to really does help highlight what it is we're trying to do. So by looking, I thought it might be nice if we looked at the different ways we've supported care farming over the last 15 years, so that you can see how we've got that knowledge of the sector. You'll be relieved to hear I'm not going to go through everyone in detail. I'm just going to touch on a few of the key ones. Starting really with the humble beginnings in around 2005, the first conference, where we gathered people together, like-minded people. There were people who were doing care farming, but they were very much doing it in isolation, and they didn't know that there were other people doing similar things around the UK. And we brigaded everybody together under the name of care farming, and the National Care Farming Initiative was set up with a network and database to allow people to exchange both ideas and good practice and to provide an information hub. And one of the first things we did as the National Care Farming Initiative was to commission an initial scoping exercise. We wanted to know just how many people are care farming in the UK. And at that point, we identified 76 care farmers. And the other thing we wanted to do was to demonstrate the proof of principle. Can we show any benefits to service users from attending care farms in the UK? So we carried out a small scale snapshot before and after study, before and after a care farm session, and it showed a significant increases in service user self-esteem and mood state. So it's looking at the evidence. So we did something on scale and on the evidence. And of course, there's a lot more evidence now than there was in 2005. And then sort of through to 2012, where National Care Farming Initiative sort of developed into a charity called Care Farming UK and introduced not only its work, but the work of care farms to a wider professional audience. 2013, the Care Farming Code of Practices trialled, so looking at quality there. 2015 and 17, we looked at scale, increasing demand, looking at new markets. So as you can see, coverage, capacity, demand, evidence, quality. 2017, we looked at new markets, sort of promotion of the sector, so sort of tackled the demand and communication. And 2018 was when, as Debbie mentioned earlier, Social Farms and Gardens was formed, and sort of we're lucky enough really in 2019 we pulled all of this information on the scale, the quality, capacity, evidence. We put it all together to put it together for the growing care farming bid, which I'm happy to say, as you know, that you know, we got that. And so that's sort of whistle-stop tour of all the things we've done has really shown you that we've got a history of gathering information on the state of play of the care farming sector, working closely with care farmers. And because of this, we've been successful in gaining government funding for the Growing Care Farming project. So as you can see, we've been tracking the sector since 2007, how we used to say, and we've been sort of building on the information about the sector year on year. And it's really, really important that we do this annual survey. The more care farms and green care providers that participate in our survey, the more accurate our data is, and the more credibility we then have to represent your needs to policymakers and funders. You know, we know that referral and commissioning environment for care farming services is incredibly complex, and that accessing consistent, reliable funding for delivering care farming services is really challenging. And in order to communicate your needs, to help tackle referral blockages, and to push for additional sustainable funding sources, having a better understanding of the picture helps us to make sure that what we're talking about is based on fact apart from anything else, and that we can work together. The more information we have and the more we can do together to support the sector, the more people will have the opportunity to benefit from care farming services. And we'll forward the links to all of these surveys after the presentation. Obviously, they will all be up on our web pages, apart from the latest one, which I'm still writing, but we'll put it up as soon as we've done. Okay, so that's sort of a bit of background for you. Let's get on to the scale of the sector. How many care farms are there? So first of all, I'll just say that this data originates from our Social Farms and Gardens CRM database, and the Northern Irish figures were put together with help from our colleagues at Rural Support, and the Republic of Ireland figures were given to us this very morning by our colleagues at Social Farming Ireland. So the latest scores on the doors, at the moment we've got 219 care farms and sites delivering care farming services in the UK, with 90 in the Republic of Ireland as well. Country breakdown for you, we've got 253 in England, 10 in Wales, 12 in Scotland, 24 in Northern Ireland. And we've also got approximately 150 prospective care farms out there in the wings. And prospective care farms are those farms or sites that are in the planning stages or being very close to opening for business. And you can see the regional representation there on the slide. The good thing is that since the last time we did a bit of a tally on the number of care farms, we had 250 care farms in the UK. So we've seen a nice bit of growth there since the last survey. Okay, so the annual or nearly annual survey was created during using SurveyMonkey and sent out via email, and we tweeted the link to the survey, and it was also forwarded to other networks by our partners Thrive and other stakeholder organisations. It was open to both care farms that are fully operational and those in the planning stages, but obviously only the results from care farms that are fully operational have been included in this report. because it's current provision that we wanted to report on. So in total, I suppose actually it's worth mentioning that we've adapted and changed some of the questions in the survey in line with both the requirements for growing care farming and in line with working within a new organisation. So they're not direct comparisons. Some of the questions are different. But in total, the survey was completed by 118 respondents. 93 of those were care farmers, which represents a response rate of 40%. So what did they tell us? Well, over the years, we kept being asked by many people about the legal governance of care farms. So for the last couple of surveys, we've included this question because, you know, prospective care farms looking at setting up had been wondering what governance would work best. We'd been asked by commissioners, and all sorts of people wanted to know this. Also about land tenure. So you can see that the legal governance of care farms is varied. Just over a third are charity and just under a third are community interest company, with charitable companies limited by guarantee, partnerships, other things also being featured there. So a mixture, but the majority are charitable or community interest. So moving on to land tenure then, most care farms are either owner-occupiers or they rent their land. You can also see there that 21% occupy the land for either no charge or a peppercorn rent. We also know that some care farms operate on an outreach basis, but none of those took part in the survey, so they don't feature in our pie chart, but just thought I'd let you know that they are there. It's important for us to know about governance and land tenure because it helps us to provide relevant support, resources and information needed for the sector in order to best serve our care farmers. So a little bit on governance and land tenure there. Care farms, so this is about the care farms now, moving on to what they're doing. Care farms in the survey told us they're delivering services, anything from one farm that was doing care farming on 1 week for 1 week in a year to 52 weeks a year. 14% of care farms are actually open all year round, which I think is amazing. However, most care farms are they're open for between 40 and 50 weeks a year, and the average weeks in a year being open is 46. So a little bit about capacity. Most care farms said that they're not currently running at their full capacity, so they're not full to the seams. The average obviously varies depending on farm to farm, but the average operating capacity was 63%. So there's some latent potential for expansion already there, so that's sort of interesting really about capacity and delivery. Okay, so about the people that attend care farms, the proportion of care farms catering for particular service user groups is shown on the graph to the right. So 72% of care farms work with people with a learning disability, 67% mental ill health, 65% work with people with autism spectrum disorders, and 54% with learning difficulties. Other client groups include people with brain injuries, cancer survivors, those who've experienced a bereavement, people looking to build confidence and skills to get back into work, and children in care. But you can see sort of the large array of different service user groups that are provisioned on care farms, which is really, really exciting. And for the under 18s, we asked this sort of in a lot more detail this year so that we can give more information on what's happening with the under 18s. For the under 18s, learning difficulty, ASD, young people excluded from school or on an alternative curriculum provision, and learning disability. So there's sort of some, most care farms work with a variety of different client or service user groups. ranging from 1 to maximum. One care farm was working with 21 different service user groups. However, the average number of different groups that a care farm will work with is 5. This can happen either on different days of the week or by different service user groups working together where appropriate to do so. Actually, research from the Netherlands suggests it's the mixing of clients with different abilities and needs that can add to increased benefits, working together as a team. Interestingly, I did also notice some country and regional variation in the data. For the first time, when looking at the England data on its own, the proportion of care farms delivering services to adults with mental health has increased quite largely, and that actually puts mental ill health as the top of the list in England, which is a change from the last survey where learning disability was in the lead. When you look at the UK figures, when you put them all back together, the differences aren't so marked, but this is mainly because the leading service user group attending care farms in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland is still adults with a learning disability. We didn't ask this time about how often service users attend a care farm, but it's we know from previous surveys that because it didn't change, that it's between once and 3 times a week that somebody will participate in care farming services. And the other thing I wanted to say here is that the majority of care farms are offering non-resident, so that's 93% are non-residential, but there are some residential care farms out there. Okay, so moving on about the care farming services. And on this slide, I wanted to talk about the care farming places. So care farming places are typically for a day session, but there are also morning sessions, afternoon sessions and hourly sessions. It really does depend on the needs and the abilities of the service users themselves. So I'm now going to talk about England data specifically when talking about the number of places, although the report will have the data in for all the different countries in as well. So care farms in our survey deliver services for anything between 1 to 7 days a week, but most care farms, the majority of care farms, are open for 5 days a week. And there's sort of enormous variation as well about how many people are attending each care farm on a day. Varies between 2 and 40 people, depending on the service user group and care farm setup. But the average is 10 service users per day per care farm, which then if you do the maths, that's an average weekly total of 50 places per care farm. And this is actually not counting weekend places. Out of our survey participants, 26 care farms actually also offer services at weekends, which is interesting. But those weekend places aren't included in this slide. So we know that the information we have on the number of places and care farms is from 40% of care farms that took part in the survey. So if we included numbers from 100% of care farms, we can estimate that the total would increase to 7,153 places per week. And care farms are delivering services for an average of 46 weeks per year, so it's reasonable to conservatively estimate that care farms are currently delivering 329,038 places in England alone. And this, of course, is not including weekend places. And this is a growth actually from the last time we counted the places, although we've got a much more advanced or robust way of calculating number of places this time round. But really exciting stuff in terms of number of care farming places and the number of people that are who are having the opportunity to benefit from spending time on a care farm. Excuse me while I just check my timings. Fine. Okay, so length of care. So this is about costs, care farming costs. Some care farms, as I said before, are offering different types of session. Some care farms charge for individual sessions by the hour, others for a full day, and others for a group. The average cost for a day session is about £60. And obviously, but this really does vary depending on the session length and service user need and ability. And in the survey, we asked how much a typical care farming session costs. So these are the averages of the answers that we got. So average cost, £60 a session. Interestingly, obviously, some care farmers told us in the survey that although the services are free to the service user, they were receiving grant or other funding from different sources to enable them to provide services. So this sort of neatly, I hope, segments into referral routes and funding. So I think the first thing to say about referral routes and funding for care farm places is that it enormously varied, and it's often a very, very complex picture. There's variation not only locally, but also between different commissioning routes. But we asked the question on the survey, and so we can say that the referrals most frequently are, or from the proportion of care farms receiving these referrals, at the top of the pack are referrals via personalised social care budgets, local authority social care referrals, families or carers, and specialist education services. Although you can see in the graph to the right there that referrals are also received from health, community mental health, other voluntary sector organisations, self-referrals, social prescribing, CAMS, and GPs. And there were other sources mentioned but these are the most frequently occurring, if you like. So you can see it's a very varied picture there. But I think the thing that's come out that's really interesting that we've found this year and this time round is that we've sort of been able to sort of really get down into the nitty-gritty a bit more. And we know now that referrals may come with or without funding. And although obviously the ideal is that the they're providing, care farms provide a service that's for the individual, so you would assume that the funding would follow an individual for the services they're providing. But we've discovered, and I guess we've always known, that care farmers typically have to think outside the box and access other funding sources to adequately cover the costs of providing services. Excuse me, and some referral routes seem to be better at providing funding for the individual referrals than others. And if you look at the graph to the right, if you're looking at, so there's the list of the different referral agencies on the left, and you will see that there's a sort of brown bar and a paler brown bar. So essentially, the bigger the brown bar, the better the referral route is at providing associated funding to go with those referrals. And the bigger the pale brown line is the sort of shows the I was going to say the worst offenders, but that possibly a little unfair. But you will see that, for example, social care and education are at the top here, and they seem to do much better than some of the health referrals in terms of actually paying for the individuals, which is really, really interesting. This could be, of course, because currently GPs, CAMS, refer less service users into care farms. That might be the reason, or it might be that the markets aren't as developed, or this might be the reason that there are fewer referrals because there's no money accompanying the service. But this data really gives us something to get our teeth into, to talk to commissioners and to policymakers, to really start to highlight where work needs to be done in order to ensure a sort of sustainable funding option to enable care farms to continue to provide services. So that is essentially our whistle-stop tour through the findings from the latest annual survey. I wanted to sort of wrap up really, so that we have plenty of time for questions, and so that I can answer, if anybody wants to know any more details, I can let you know. So I wanted to end really to say that we really have a history of gathering information on the state of play of the care farming sector and working closely with care farmers. We really, the more care farms and green care providers that take part in our survey, the more accurate our data becomes and the more credibility we have to represent your needs to policymakers and to funders. And we hope to see the numbers of care farming places and the number of people taking part in the survey continue to grow as the support and advocacy continues from growing care farming. But I wanted to really say that it's part of the story, it's part of what we do. And as well as advocating on your behalf to commissioners, policymakers and the general public, and promoting care farming in ELM, social prescribing and other relevant agendas, through, we're doing more than gathering information on the sector. Through growing care farming, we're also developing a whole range of resources, case studies, films, presentations, all sorts of things that are going up on our website all the time, and putting together sort of all sorts of things that whatever we can do to support both care farmers and also to provide information and more details for people who might be looking at commissioning care farming, or for service users who might want to be looking for other things to do with their personalised budgets, for example. So we've been doing all sorts of things that we're doing, and it's really exciting times for us, especially now we have a team of wonderful staff to help us do this. We've also been developing a whole load of care farming support training together with our partners at Thrive. A lot of that's up on, there's some that's online, that's all available via our website now, and obviously we're hoping that the face-to-face will resume again in January next year, 21. We're also enabling all sorts of regional and national networking opportunities, and last but not least, we're promoting the Care Farming Code of Practice, and watch out for more information on this next month. So we're really excited about our sector going forward, and we're also promoting heavily the role that care farming will play in the nation's mental health recovery post-COVID. So we're really flying the flag, and I think we're lucky that over I say lucky, not that COVID has been lucky at all, but one of the things that has come out of lockdown and people sort of not being able to function normally in their normal lives is that people have found a lot of solace in nature, in their gardens, of being outside, and that's really helping us fly the flag. It's not quite such a stretch for people to see that nature is can help, and by and large that care farming can help as well. So rest assured, we're flying the flag for care farming at every opportunity, and for more information on this, please see our website. I think that's probably it from me. If I just want to say thank you for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rachel. That's been really good. I think just to see the sort of history and development all kind of laid out in one place, and to see that that kind of pathway is, for me, it's been really really reassuring, I think, to see where we sort of ended up. And I think I was lucky enough to have a bit of a sort of sneaky peek at the presentation last night at some of the slides, and I think, as you say, I think the sort of the complexity of this sort of referral and commissioning route has really been teased out this time, and I think it's probably something which we had known sort of anecdotally. This sort of healthcare funding was definitely a sort of gap, but actually to sort of see it laid out in black and white there is certainly something which I think again just lends a bit of weight to our arm. But we have got some questions which I just had a look at. I'm going to hand over to Paul. One of the questions is one I asked you last night, actually, so you'll be pleased that you've you answered it for me, so I'll hand it over to Pearl anyway. Pearl, if you'd like to go through the questions with Rachel.
Yeah, sure. So we've had a couple of questions. One is about linking in. So the question is, are you linking in with the development of and consultation with ELMS to ensure that care farming is properly recognised by DEFRA within the agricultural landscape as a public benefit?
Absolutely. Yes, that's a really good question. We are taking every possible opportunity. I'm shoehorning it into discussions wherever we go. I have been, obviously, we're lucky because we're a government funded programme. It's given us sort of inroads, and it's enabled us to access the people that we need to access in terms of our advocacy as well. So we are in discussions about ELMS. We will be and we'll update people as when we go with that. But one of the things, obviously, that through higher level stewardship, the sort of predecessor to the new sort of ELMS system, funding for care farming places was recognised, as well as funding for the sort of more generalised school visits. And we are really, really keen that the recognition of care farming as a public good, as a way to link people back to the countryside, and all of those things are covered within ELMS. I keep raising the question. I keep being reassured by folks in Natural England and RPA that don't worry, care farming will feature in this. We've got various sort of irons in the fire, but rest assured we're very much pushing that. It goes against everything that DEFRA seems to be pushing for if they then drop care farming out of ELMS. So rest assured we're working to advocate on care farming's behalf on that score.
Okay, great, thank you. There was also a question on something we discussed recently, actually, about definitions. Someone is saying that they're surprised to see that learning disability and learning difficulty as discrete groups, and what are the definitions of those two?
Now, that's $1 million question. Funnily enough, this was what Debbie was alluding to. I was asked this, and I've had a bit of a journey, since working with care farms actually over the years, in that I think probably myself included, there's a danger that you sort of, that you sort of use them as what's the word? It's not interdisciplinary, I can't think of it. Thank you, Debbie. Yes, interchangeable is the same thing. But I was corrected by care farmers that work with different client groups, and also with my work with Mind and Mental Health Foundation. It is a very contentious issue. There is no one hard and fast definition about the difference, but most places say that there is a difference. So a learning disability, as far as I understand it, and please forgive me if I get the terminology wrong, but a learning disability is usually it's a intellectual disability, something that very often somebody is born with, and for example, a learning disability would include something like Down syndrome. Learning difficulty is more of a emotional. So learning disability affects your sort of independence, the way you react with others, and sort of everyday living. A learning difficulty is, would include things like ADHD, autism, ASD, I believe. So there is a difference, and so because we were corrected by people who said, you've asked about learning disability, what about learning difficulty? So we responded to our care farmers really, and to the sector to define it. We can, if it would be helpful, I think I'll probably put a definition, or the definition that we use in the report, to clarify it but it's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah, you clarified to us earlier, you were saying, well, it was just really interesting to know about that disability is more of a lifelong condition that can start before adulthood, whereas a difficulty is something that's kind of linked to cognitive impairment, isn't it? Something like that. So yeah, the definitions will really help, won't they? Somewhere.
Yes, I mean, I wish this whole modern technology. I would love to just get the email that I sent with the definitions up so I could read it seamlessly, but I'm too terrified of accidentally stopping the webinar
I
to risk.
have got it here. I could.
I've got it in front of me. You said more or less what you
Ah,
put to us last night. So thank you for the
excellent,
question. It's thank you to the person who asked the question, because it made
Yeah.
me feel less better that it was something that I actually asked last night as well. So that's great. Pearl, do you want to pick up on the next question?
Yeah, we have a couple of other questions. So here's one. Is the increase in the number of care farms engaging people with mental health issues partly because we have greater awareness of mental health, or even because mental health has become a catchphrase for all sorts of things?
That's a good question. I think it's largely recognised that I think it could be twofold. We've seen the need for mental health care increase. We know that there are increasing numbers, and interestingly, even more increasing since COVID, of people with mild to moderate mental ill health rather. So we know that there are more people out there that are being recognised as having a mental health issue. I think the other thing is that it's becoming more people who commission for mental health are seeing the benefit and the links between being outside and improvements to mental health. So I think that it's twofold, but we haven't. It is a really good question because it's a really interesting point. But it's also interesting that in England that it's now pipped into terms of the survey data, pipped learning disability to the post in terms of the client group that's on most care farms. So we're getting tongue-tied there. Thanks. Next, any other questions?
I think that's it for now, unless someone types up on the chat function.
I've got a question actually, Rachel, just to sort of it's probably this is following on really from that question. Is your sense, I mean, obviously there's a sort of issue that's been flagged up through this data that we are sort of looking short on the funding on the health side. Do you think that is something? It's probably not a very fair question to ask you in front of a lot of other people, but do you think that is something that possibly post-COVID, with the level of interest and the sort of growth of interest in this sector, do you think it might be something as we move forward which we will actually see a change in?
I'm hoping so. We're definitely in a different situation than we certainly were 10, 15, even sort of a couple of years ago really now. I think even if you take something like social prescribing as one example of health referral and commissioning, although we know there's a lot more. I think one of the dangers is that when you hear health, everybody just thinks of social prescribing, and it's just one part of the referrals. When we first heard about social prescribing, we thought, woohoo, this sounds absolutely perfect for care farming referrals and funding. And then when we looked into it in more detail, sort of several years ago, we thought, oh, well, hang on a minute, this is great, but there's no funding paying for the service delivery. So we thought, oh, it's not so great. And since then, we've really advocated, we've really highlighted this issue to anybody that would listen. And I was on a call the other day listening to about some future developments that are coming out of the National Academy for Social Prescribing, NASP, and they really seem to have understood that up until now all the support for social prescribing has been sort of targeted towards the navigators, the facilitators of social prescribing, and they've really recognized that now it's time to support the service delivery end as opposed to the signposting bit. So I'm reasonably confident actually, and not least because of COVID. I think we're going to be in a situation, we're starting to see data coming out from all sorts of surveys that, from children who are really anxious after COVID and right through to adults, that there's going to be a real need, and existing mental health services, can't pick up the slack at the moment. They're just oversubscribed. And you know, if we can highlight the amazing potential that care farming and also other green care options can give within social prescribing, you know, I think we're in a really good position, and also in mental health and other and we're, you know, watch this space. I'm really confident. I think it's, you know, times have changed and we're getting there, definitely.
Great. Thank you. I don't think we've had any more questions in. If there are any questions for Rachel after we've sort of finished this webinar, please do sort of pop anything you want to on an email. You'll find us. Oh, hang on. We've had a last ditch one. Do you want to pick that one up, Pearl? Can you see it?
About schools, isn't it?
Are there any care farms offering forest schools or bushcraft activities? Any working with schools closely?
Oh, yes, I can just see that now.
Yeah.
The answer is yes and yes. All sorts of care farms work with schools and offer bushcraft as part. Obviously, you know, the range of activities you can do on a farm varies enormously, and on any site. And I think it's sort of most care farms that I know of, you know, are always thinking of new things to do, new activities to do, as well as sort of the livestock and the crops and vegetable growing, that sort of thing. So a lot of them do also do bushcraft and that sort of thing. And obviously we know that care farms do work with schools, and you know, I think it's probably worth mentioning as well that it's not just so obviously care farms usually work with individuals with a defined need, so whether that's a special educational need or you know, a need for alternative provision, and so they'll look at all sorts of things. But there are also through the Children and Nature programme, the Nature Friendly Schools strand of the programme. They're also working with schools for children without a defined need, if you see what I mean. I hesitate to say this, you know, sort of, so for classes of children as opposed to the individuals. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great.
A couple of others have come in.
Okay.
What would be your advice for a newly prospective care farmer interested in exploring opportunities and interest in potential services, and where to start?
Oh, now that's quite a good one, I think. I think our advice to prospectives would be to watch this space. One of the things that we will be starting up again with in January is looking at sort of looking at the regional networking side of things, so that people in the regions can get together, because one of the things that we're very conscious of in terms of supporting prospective care farmers and working with existing care farmers is that there's you know, we really have to look at the need of the region sort of a little bit strategically. There is no point in having 6 care farms spring up all within a 10-mile radius of each other, all delivering services to the same client group, because that's just not a sensible approach. So it's really about looking at where the gaps are in your region, and sort of if you're setting up with a slightly different client group or service user group than your neighbouring care farm down the road. But we've got all sorts of things on the web pages designed for prospective care farmers and to help with this. But I think it's the sort of networking and talking to other care farmers in the area and also commissioners, and to find out what the individual needs are in the area is really key. Debbie, have you got anything to add to that?
Just wanted to highlight the training as well that's on our website. We've got a sort of number of training courses which are now available, and I would sort of point you towards those. If you go to the Social Farms and Gardens website, I think when we move on, I think we'll get to the end, is the next slide. I think we'll probably have the web address on it. Just look for the growing care farming pages, and the training courses are on there, and do make sure that you're signed up to sort of receive bulletins and that kind of thing.
Yes, the web page is here as well, and I'll circulate that afterwards. Sorry,
yeah,
go back to the questions.
we've got Pearl, I don't know whether you've seen the question that's come in via email. Have you seen that?
We
Yeah,
have another
great.
question coming in through our email.
Yeah.
Question about I had a question about how you evidence the impact these farms are having.
Could I ask whether that's the evidence of impact on the individual?
I'm assuming it is. It was
On
sent
service
by
users.
email, so it wasn't done via live chat or questioning.
Okay.
So I think it would be the impact on the individual.
Well, we're in quite an exciting position. Back in the early days, way back in 2005, there really wasn't any evidence, not from the UK, about the benefits to service users. I was lucky enough to do the first bit of research. Since then, there have been all sorts of very capable researchers. I did notice that a couple of them had logged into or had signed up to be part of that webinar. So there's all sorts of evidence out there. We pulled together some of the evidence of the impact of care farms on service users in our report on green care for mental health, which I can forward to the Inquirer and put a link to after the webinar as well. But yes, there's also, and there's quite a lot of evidence internationally as well. There was a recent, I think, was it published last year, what's it called, a review of the literature by Leeds. There's all sorts of evidence out there where we're not in the position that we were in a while ago with no sort of hard evidence. We've got that now, and the impacts can be amazing, you know, both from the sort of academic research and anecdotally and case studies. And you know, when you talk to people who've been affected by care farming, you know, who have been affected and helped through care farming, it can be really amazing. Whether it's improved quality of life for somebody with a condition that's not going to ever go away, but you can help people to feel better about themselves and enjoy a better quality of life with a condition, or whether it's helping people out in times of stress or illness or sort of a mental health wobble. It can be amazing how care farming can transform people's lives and to give them back the potential they had before they were you know, struck by an illness or a misfortune in their lives. I could get I'll shut up now, otherwise I'll be talking about waxing lyrical for hours. So I think hopefully that answers the question.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rachel. Brilliant.
You.
Well, I think, Pearl, as far as I can see on the email and the questions and the chat, as far as I can see, I think we probably probably covered any questions to come in. But as I said before, please do feel free to email any of the team. We will be constantly uploading resources through the autumn. So there'll be more of the sort of reports and work being done on trying to collate more of this sort of research and background information. So we'll keep you updated on that. So I think it just remains for me to say thank you very much to everyone who's joined us today, and particular thanks to Rachel for her time and expertise. We hope that you found it all very useful. I know I always learn something as I go along. After this, you're going to receive an automated email a few hours when this is closed down with a link to a short feedback survey. Please do complete this survey, as it does help us to keep a track of who's accessing resources, but it also provides opportunities for us to learn and to adapt work moving forward. The webinar recording will be uploaded onto our website shortly. And yes, feel free to contact us. And please also, the tags are on here. Do follow us, the Growing Care Farming Project, on Twitter, and tag us onto any social media posts that you'd like us to share. We're quite hot on Twitter. We like Twitter as a social media platform. So so please do use that. Rachel, were you wanting to just say something?
No, I was just another plea for, you know, we love feedback, we love surveys, you know, tell us what we're doing right. You know, we're always, as Debbie said, you know, keen to learn, especially about our webinars and our other resources. You know, what's working, what you found useful, what you haven't found useful, so that we can always strive to improve.
Great. Thank you. So thank you to everybody who's joined us, and please do keep in touch with us. Bye-bye from all of us.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.